obscure world of parking. We use it every day, but have we really capitalized on the intricacies of our industry? In this podcast, the Parking Network will go behind the scenes and talk to industry professionals about all things parking, from the horizon of evolving technology and even stories of the old days. We hope to encourage and inspire operators and property managers alike to look at parking through a new lens. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Our Parking Industry Podcast. I'm Krista Olien, and I'm here with Clyde Wilson and Leigh Thomas. Today, we're going to do our recap of the episode with Joaquin Rojas. It was a delight. That might be my favorite episode to date. He provided such great details and just kind of information about how he came up in the parking industry, things that he's learned as he's touched various parts and various styles of parking, and his takeaways, what he's learned, and how he's applied that to his ventures going forward. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I learned a lot. It was really great to hear. I know Miami and Florida are kind of a unique atmosphere that he's operated in, but I think a lot of the takeaways from that episode can be applied to any operation and most definitely challenging operations across the country. So I appreciated Joaquin's insight and all the details he had to provide. Leigh, what was one of your favorite discussion topics?
Well, good morning, Clyde and Krista. Yes, that podcast was so fun to record. Joaquin brought just an air of professionalism and expertise, and I so enjoyed visiting with him. I also learned a lot. I think the thing that I've thought of most often since that session was all the stories he had about the importance of training well. That if we have high standards in an operation and we want to standardize those high standards, that things have to be taught. Everything from wearing your uniform correctly to being empathetic when appropriate, to taking care of your books, to speaking to management. He mentioned all of those things, and I feel like that's very applicable to anyone in any industry. But it's an interesting conversation to have in the parking industry because we've talked in TPN roundtables many times. There's not a lot of standardization in this industry, and there's very little training material available for people who want to get better at their jobs.
Yeah, the high standards that he talked about, the manager he had, that, if you came to work and you didn't have your pen in your pocket, you were sent home. And I think, we've talked about this also, that parking kind of has this auxiliary opinion, like people view parking as an auxiliary industry, and maybe it's just a supporting role. But the people that are in the industry on the ground that are holding those high standards really take that up a notch and make parking and the people that are in parking professionals, and service is important, and the way you appear to those people you are serving matters in a customer service industry. And so holding those standards high and not wavering from that, treating everybody the same, that was a really great observation too. You don't have to like me. I'm here to do a job, and I'm going to treat everyone the same, and the standard is high and the expectations are high. And the people that meet those, he was talking about people that had been in their current valet for 10 years. It's like, that is impressive. That is impressive.
The valet position lasts that long. It's a really high turnover job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Clyde, what was one of your favorite takeaways from Joaquin's discussion?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, there were a lot of great takeaways in this. You just mentioned the one that was probably the most important, or kind of talked around it with several others, and that's training and the expectations of the manager. The real key back there was Joaquin was talking about this manager who standards, and everybody was expected to live up to those. We in this business have thousands of people working all over the country, and it's really hard to, unless it's your mindset, it's really hard to dictate that across a whole country. But so the only way you do that is there's no exceptions. That's the rule. The rule has to be something that's tolerable, that employees can expect. But look at the customer service that brings. It really changes the customer service. And then the training that goes along with that. And he mentioned training the trainer. So it's not just putting good people out there. It's also all the background that goes into that. So I guess talking around to answer the question that you really asked me, the answer to that was all of the detail that he talked about that went on behind the scenes to present those businesses that nobody ever sees. Nobody ever sees the things that go on behind the scenes. You don't see the training. You don't see the train the trainer. You see a bunch of employees that are out there doing a good job, but you don't see, as a customer, the manager over here that says, you may not like me, but this is the way we're going to do it. And he drills it home with everybody, he says. So the really important part was that behind the scenes that goes on in so many parking operations, that we don't do a good job of making sure people understand what happens behind the scenes. Maybe it's important, maybe it's not. But in the case, in the way Joaquin told it, I think it's important.
Yeah, and whenever things get busy and it gets hectic and the day to day is just so much, those are the first things to go, are the behind the scenes things, because no one sees them. But they impact in the most foundational way the day to day. And so if that foundation is strong and laid appropriately, then that day to day all of a sudden becomes easier because your customers are happy, because you're providing good customer service, because you've been trained to be empathetic when you're working in a hospital setting. And that's the expectation, that you are empathetic, whether you feel like being empathetic or not, doesn't really matter. You are. And if you're not, bye. So keeping that standard high and, all of those things. So go ahead, Lisa.
Yes, those behind the scene things that aren't noticeable reminds me of a saying I heard recently that was, we don't rise to the occasion, we sink to the level of our systems. And it's those systems that make us better and drive us forward. My favorite quote from the podcast recording was, he said that you need to get ready for what you're going to be. So that's that behind the scenes mentality of, the valet, he's a valet, but he wants to be a manager. So he needs to start acting like a manager today, because he needs to get ready for what he wants to be. When you're a messy, small parking operation, we need to act like a big, good operation. So what systems do we need to put in place to be a good operation? Like, we need to start today being ready for what we're going to be.
As you were saying that, I was thinking about one of the several common operations that Joaquin and I both worked on was Jackson Memorial Hospital. And it was, as you were saying, what happens behind the scenes to get ready. Jackson was the most difficult thing I had ever seen. And, the only way we survived that was, and I opened it on day one with 60 brand new employees. And except for one, all new managers. So, and it was terrible. And the thing that I thought about when you said that, I remember the day, I'm going to tell the quick truck stories because it's important here, was the day that I got there, which was 2 or 3 weeks before we were going to open. I'm standing on the campus. It's a huge campus. And I see this parking truck go by, and it's loaded in the back. The back bed of the parking truck is loaded over with gate arms. I mean, it's tiled over with gate arms. And I thought, what the heck are they doing? And so I asked somebody, and they said, well, yeah, we have to have that because every day. Now, remember, there are about 30-something exits on this place. In the garages, the surface lots, there are about 30 entries and 30 exits, right? So he said, well, yeah, the job is every day, the first person out, the first nurse or staff member that's out of each garage in each lane, their job is to break the gate. So they drive through the gate. So he said, we replace every one of them every day. I said, well, that's why they all look like brand new 1x4s. But the reason I'm telling that story is, so it's about 2 months into fighting this problem. We have to fix this. So we started a process. We figured out a way to stop it, to stop them from breaking the gates until we could get equipment replaced that was newer. I got a phone call. I was walking by the office where our parking office was, and one of the ladies in there said, Mr. Wilson, come here. I've got a call I need you to take. So I take the call. I've got a doctor on the other end who's yelling at me. And he says, I can't get out of the garage when I need to go. You guys have fixed everything, and now the gates work. I can't get out. And I thought, we did our job. And I said, yes, sir. And the gates are going to work every day. You might want to be sure you learn how to use them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that was, I've got a doctor in the hospital yelling at me on all this stuff that we just did, but it was the confidence that behind the scenes we've done the right thing. No matter what, we are never going back where they were.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great feeling because I could display it. So guess what? I had 60 people over there saying, yep, that's the way we're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to use the gate. You're not going to break the gate arm. So it was good. And those kind of operations just create this. So you either win or you lose. There's no in between on these things. You either win or you lose. So that's why I was thinking about that when you were telling that story. And I thought, yeah, that's the way it works. These things, if you're prepared behind the scenes to set your standards, this is what we're going to do. When everybody's yelling at you, you realize this is the right thing. We're going to stick with this. And guess what? They'll figure it out. They'll get over it.
Well, and it sounds like the operation used to be where everyone was kind of chasing their tail, instead of finding the root problem and correcting that, it was let's fix all the things that happen. And you can barely keep your head above water when you're doing that. And so they were just running around fixing gates instead of fixing the problem that was causing the gates to need to be fixed. So going back to the core of what needs to happen, the customers need to be able to come into the garage. They need to be able to exit the garage. And the process is to make sure that all of that is fluid and happens appropriately has to be solid. And the people that are there have to be able to facilitate if anything goes wrong successfully. And so I love that you and Joaquin's backgrounds have kind of been intertwined in so many different ways. That's so interesting that you were part of an operation intimately that he was also a part of. And so y'all both have insider knowledge of how difficult that was and truly what it took to make it function at a high level.
Yeah, the great thing about Jackson for me was I realized that it was really hard and you learn so much. Like I said, I thought I had this industry nailed the day before I opened Jackson Memorial Hospital. And the next day I realized, I don't know, Jack, this is going to test me. And it was great. It was a great experience. Probably looking back, and I've thought about this many times, looking back, realizing that was probably the best experience I ever had. Even though I had great mentors, I did a lot of other projects. Jackson Memorial Hospital changed me, I think, in how I manage parking over the coming years after that. So it was exciting.
But I think then there's a testament that there was the gap in time that then corrections needed to be made to that operation again because it was not managed well in the interim. And so being able
it
to
fell apart.
Yeah. So then whenever Joaquin stepped back into that project, there were challenges that had to be overcome again. And so I don't know, it's really interesting to see whenever the maintenance isn't done along the way, how easy it is to just slide back into, just checking the boxes every day instead of that forward thinking like Leigh was talking about.
Yeah, I heard Joaquin say that because he was about 10 or 12 years after we opened Jackson. He came in, we opened Jackson on May 1st, 1990. Joaquin came in about 2002, I think he said 2002 or 2003. So the equipment that we put in there at the time was new, and we put it in December 1990. It took me 6 months to get, this place was huge, to get bids out, get the equipment in, to get it all installed, all the communications that were required. We were putting in the first scan system that Federal APD had ever produced. And it was great equipment. But it had fallen apart by the time Joaquin gets there. So he says everybody's stealing you because they can't keep up with it. So this place was a challenge. And if the challenging managers aren't there over the years, and I won't go into who are the people that came in there 4 or 5 years later, but you know them. And it kind of gradually drifted downhill. And then Joaquin came in, and it was kind of good because he came in and had to do it again. He had to fix it again. He didn't come into an operation that was perfect. He came into a huge, tough operation that he had to fix. So guess what? He's still here.
Mm-hmm.
If he hadn't fixed it, he wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
So we have that operation to thank that we all now have Joaquin in the parking business.
I saw an interview on LinkedIn recently by a very well-known parking industry expert, and he said that the mistake that gets made so often is that we ride the wave of our success for too long. So at Jackson Memorial, when you fix those big issues, we can't stay in a fixed state because it's going to break down again. Like, we constantly have to be improving and looking ahead and seeing what's coming and getting ready for what we need to be, instead of just being content with being successful today.
Right. And that's a very, very good statement, because we see that all the time. One of the parts that goes along with that, and it goes back to, if you want to go back and re-listen to it, it goes back to one of my stories from the road. But I won't tell the story again. But what happens is that we see a lot when the equipment that was put in, there was a lot of work and effort went into putting that equipment in. There was a lot of thought behind trying to manage this huge place. We get it in, it's all working, everybody's ready. But guess what the traffic was? I mean, if you were a parking gate at Jackson Memorial Hospital, you were going up and down 1,500 to 2,000 times a day. The equipment spitting out tickets, 2,000 a day, every one of you, every day, in hot, humid, salty air. So it's just not going to last long. And one of the things that we see is the parking operators, we really see this in most every operation we touch almost. They don't prepare for what's coming 2 or 3 years down the road to get the owners ready. Okay, there's another capital expense coming. It's out there. This is about how much it's going to be. We have to start getting ready for that. Instead, it goes on until it just falls apart. Nothing works. Everything's a disaster. Everybody's mad. And then you have to rush to put something in without preparing. And that's a great point, Leigh. That's exactly what Joaquin ran into. He was 12 years later on probably the toughest operation I had ever seen on equipment. And the stuff that we put in there in 1990 was toast.
And it was still there.
Yeah, and it was still there. And it actually stayed there for a while after Joaquin got there. So it for a little while. But preparing for that. So that's a great story of moving toward the future. How do we present that? You have to go to work managing today every day, because the customers are coming today. But you as a manager have to always think down the road. And it's like we do as a company with the parking network. How many times in our company meetings do we talk about who are we? Where are we going? You're constantly having to look down the road. And I know sometimes we do that until we think it's crazy, but you never get to stop doing that. We certainly get to see an awful lot of operations that did stop doing that. And we see the results of those every time we go to the field.
Sure. And it impacts the property itself. It impacts
Yes.
the company that's running it, and it impacts the ownership. So it,
Yes.
if a company is doing like Leigh said and riding that wave of success, they are also not growing, which means they're falling further and further behind in an industry that's advancing continuously.
Yes.
I love all the little tangible pieces that Joaquin provided us. So the next piece I wanted to talk through was this very sensitive and very appropriate conversation about gateless parking. And he talked through projects where gateless is appropriate. And then there's projects where gateless is not appropriate. And so how do you make those decisions and help your clients make those decisions in an appropriate fashion with all the knowledge that they need to decide what's best for them? The example he gave was talking about a surface lot that maybe in the next couple of years is going to be developed. And so there's no need to invest in equipment. So maybe gateless is appropriate there because of that forward-looking idea of what's going to happen to this project in the future. Do we need to spend that money now or keep it gateless to save on the expense because we know there's a change coming? So planning ahead, projections that look forward instead of are stuck right here on today.
Part of the problem with surface lots that he was talking about are, you mentioned the most important one, that it may be developed. And surface lots aren't meant to be surface lots their whole life. They're land banked land that are waiting for a development. So they are going to be developed. But part of the problem with them, and the reason you see so many of those as gateless, is they're not a garage. So the entry into the system is only the depth of the sidewalk plus 18 feet, the length of the car parked over here. So that's all the distance you have. So most surface lots, you don't have the distance to put a cashier, and now with LPR, a camera, unless you put front-loaded camera, and a gate, and all of that. It's hard. So it's hard to put it in. So there are a lot of people that are doing gateless, especially on surface lots. It's a very interesting topic. It's more of a buzzword to me than it is a topic. I'm certainly not a fan of taking out the gate, because I think it was the piece that works the best of all the hardware out there. It works. In my lifetime, it's worked the best.
Well, and we actually worked on a project with Joaquin that was gated.
Yeah,
And
right.
then they transitioned to make it gateless after they had already invested the money on this new development and put in the equipment to make it gated. They backtracked and took the gates out that they had already invested the money in and turned it gateless. And it was just working with Joaquin on that project. He was talking about a bookkeeper in his episode, and I was like, yeah, that project, he didn't need a bookkeeper whenever it was gated. He had a part-time bookkeeper, but as soon as it turned gateless, the bookkeeper was full-time all the time, trying to track down all the people that had not paid and like keeping up with this and that. And it was a residential area, and so keeping up with residents that hadn't paid and their visitor, like all the things. So it took an operation that was functioning, and then they got sold something that wasn't appropriate for that location, and in turn it made the operation dysfunctional, and it required more manpower to make it functional whenever that hadn't been necessary at the beginning. At the beginning, he had been remotely managing it himself. It was only him. Then whenever it went gateless, it needed him. There had to be someone there to track for security purposes. There had to be the bookkeeper that was keeping up with everything, the billing and the, citations and all the things. So it was really interesting just in that little micro example that a change was made and the effects of that change on that property. And it was a residential that had commercial space down below, and it wasn't in a really busy part of town. So I can only imagine if there was a really high transient or really high demand in that area, how it would have been even more impactful. But yeah, it's cool to have that experience with Joaquin personally. So he's seen it, he knows. I dare say he's an expert on gateless and gated.
Yeah, that was a great example. Perfect, that he had experienced, and he understood what he was seeing as it started to transition. Great. So yeah, there were a lot of good stories in Joaquin's experience. It's funny, I don't know whether maybe it's just Miami, but it was always a bunch of really tough locations down there to manage, and it seemed to never end. That experience for us, from what we want our customers to grasp out of this, is the level of work behind the scenes to get a manager that can function behind the scenes and get everything ready every day, so that when you open up in the morning, you're ready. Your employees are there. They're not halfway there. They're there
With their pens.
with their with their pens
And their ankle socks.
And you also talk
Yeah.
about the color of their socks, right? So they're there with all of that, and they're ready, and they know that for the next 8 hours, this manager over here is expecting me to do this. Not kind of that. They're expecting me to do this. And then the procedures are, we've looked at the customers, we've looked at our equipment, we've looked at what we're doing, we've looked at our rates, and we're ready to deliver that. And it was interesting to go through the cycle of Joaquin's presentation, that it covered all of those very, very, as he went around, it covered all of those very important things that it took to run a tough operation every day, to get everybody to work, to make the customers understand how to get in, to be sure everybody's trained, to be sure everybody's dressed, to be sure the procedures you're using happen to work. And so those are all very important details. And it was a pleasure to listen to that conversation with Joaquin. And it was also nice because we shared so many of those operations over the years. So it made it a little easier for me to keep up with what he was trying to say. But it was great for all of us to listen to it. And I don't know, you guys can tell me what you think. I was really, really impressed with that interview.
Absolutely. I think he had a lot to share, and his breadth of knowledge is a lot. It's expansive. And again, we love the stories and the people that started out in the lowest of low positions, right? Started out as a cashier, and now they have really taken this industry and learned from it and taken it kind of as their sandbox to really grow themselves and grow their knowledge. And then you see how they have just risen from, a simple problem of collecting cash every day, being a cashier, that's my job, to now I have these gigantic problems like Jackson Memorial, where I have to, like, whoa. And, just the distance between those two obligations is so wide. And the fact that he and other people in the industry have been able to do that and make it their own and make this industry what it is and continue to keep those standards high for something that isn't usually valued and isn't usually appreciated. I think that is a testament to his character and kind of what these people bring to our industry, and how we need more people like that.
Yes, it does. And it's funny. Part of what I was thinking about as I was trying to get ready this morning, and he kind of said it on the very end, but it was really, there's a bigger story to this. We're in this transformational industry right now. So if you look back at most of the conversation that we had, there was a lot of people and equipment, and we're moving into a transitional business where we'll be using less people doing different kinds of jobs and less equipment. But the challenges only get more difficult, it seems, as we're looking at this, because it ups the professionalism of the knowledge of the person that we're talking to. I hear parking guys talk about demand-based pricing all the time, and I can tell by the way they're talking they don't understand it. But you better understand it, because understanding not just demand-based pricing, but understanding pricing is becoming more and more experienced. Understanding the relationship between the parking operator and the e-commerce provider. We've watched that become a struggle because the parking operator didn't really understand, I think they're learning it, the difficulties of managing an e-commerce provider. So the challenges where there were a bunch of little bitty ones out there and you had to be on top of a zillion things every day. Now there are not a zillion of them, but there are 100, and they're all really big.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Really big. If you don't get them, they'll get you a lot more than the thousands of problems we had on some of the typical operations. So the parking industry is going through that transformational piece, and I've heard it. I just had a phone call, and they said, well, they've done some audits recently, and because of the changes, they're just not finding any money missing.
Red flag, red flag.
Look under a different rock.
It's a really big rock right over here.
The one right in front of you. Interesting.
So it's just changed. It's just changed, and it's funny how that happens. It's certainly a manager's educational opportunity to be sitting in the place to watch that happen.
Mm-hmm.
You are going to be more professional 10 years ago than the people who come in the middle of this after it's already happened.
Mm-hmm.
Getting all of you through this transformation with all the planning you have to do and the testing. Does this work? Does this work? How is this working? Is this going to get us to where we want to go? Look at where you'll be 10 years from now.
But when the dust has already settled, that's when, like Leigh said earlier, that
Does the dust ever settle? I don't know.
well, whenever this transformation is about finished and the new people come in, they will inadvertently ride that wave of success unless they bring with them the mentality that they have to be looking forward to the next transformation, because there's something else coming. There always is, whether it's big or small. They have to be looking forward to that. And it takes a certain mentality or a certain way of thinking to bring that in and to move it forward and to see it before it crashes into you, per se.
You're exactly right. It's that it's always coming. It's always out there. And the very few managers who are able to, while I'm surviving today, that are thinking about what am I seeing? Where's it going? And it's always something, and we've all talked about this inside the parking network a bunch of times. You can only predict out about 5 years. You just have to be ready that something is looming out there that's going to impact how you do your business. So you move forward, but you're always thinking out over those next 5 years. And it's somewhere you'll get to that point where you can see 5 years and here's what's about to change, right? But you've got to stay on top of that. And I think that's a hard thing for managers to do. We're all in a tough enough job, especially when you're dealing with clients and customers and a changing world. And it's hard to stay on top of all that. But the senior managers have to be able to understand that wave. That wave is out there and you can either ride it or get out in front of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really important piece of this business, and I think probably any business. It's just a part of what we have to think about.
And when new things come our way, I think it's human nature to say, oh, yay, look at this new thing. It's going to make my job easier. And so we back off a little bit. But that maturity that you guys are talking about and that experience actually teaches us the opposite. When this new thing comes, yes, it will make this aspect of my work easier, but I need to realize that I need to pick up this new aspect of my work to take a good job or to do a good job at my job. For example, I'm a mathematician, so I'm always looking for a smaller sample test case to understand. Like when I buy one of those vacuums that vacuums while I'm at work all day.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I think, hey, I don't have to vacuum anymore. But actually, now I need to manage and clean and prepare for the new vacuum, right? So it's not we're not delegating out work. We're exchanging work for management.
Well, and I think the goal should be to aspire to keep our capacity fulfilled. So if something is making our job easier, what can I fill my space with that makes my performance or my operation better? Because there's always something that you can improve upon. So if our capacity is if there's room being made in our capacity because of I don't know, I think back to this analogy of whenever the washing machine was created, how that made so much more time. But then what human nature has done is now we have a whole lot more clothes because it's a lot easier to wash all those clothes. And so then we've kind of like negated the need for the washing machine. So because now I just have laundry all the time instead of just washing my 2 outfits, my Sunday clothes and my weekday clothes, and going from there. So I think it's interesting how human nature impacts that. But if with the right mindset, if we take that and aspire for more and for better and use that aspiration to fulfill our capacity, I think that's really important.
As it applies to us, as you were saying that, and I again won't go into a long lengthy story, or I'll try not to, but it's something that we've dealt with, and it's a funny thing, but the EV story. The EV, everybody's excited. We're going to put in charging stations and we're going to make some extra money off of all this. Nobody looked at, once you do that, how much work it is, because you got to manage it now. You're going to have people over here fighting over, I want that charger, get your car out of it. And if you don't manage it, so all that really did was it shifted focus to a whole nother thing of management.
That requires a human usually.
And so everything that you do that we see out there is just like the perfect example when Joaquin was talking Gateless. And you were describing what happened to Joaquin on that first Gateless operation that he did. We're going to put in Gateless. It's frictionless. And how much time did it cost him? He had to add people back to it. everything, everything. It may give you the ability to do this over here better, but it just shifted another focus somewhere else if you're really paying attention to your job as a manager. So you have to be ready for those things. Great. If you got EVs and you're going to have them and people want to buy them, we're going to have to deal with them. But you darn well better plan is how you're going to manage it because
Yeah.
it's coming.
I love a good metaphor and I love a good analogy. And Leigh's analogy with the check plus, I think going back to that concept and that idea that from the Parker's experience, it has been so much the same all over the world that I pull up to a gate, I pull a ticket, gate goes up, I go in, I go to the exit. Whenever I'm done parking, I pay, gate goes up, I go out. Like that is so simple and it was so universal. And now, so that's the check plus, right? Like I've accomplished all the steps. I've mastered all the levels to get out of this parking garage. Now we're taking levels away, but there's still mastery happening. And so that experience for the customer that, am I done? But have I done I can go? Like I can go. And
Did
so
I
think,
pay?
yeah. So I loved Leigh's analogy about, yeah, you got to check, you're free to go. Just because there's no gate interaction, it's confusing. And so that forward thinking applying to customer service, how do we make that more acceptable, this change, this transformation in the way we're accessing parking? How do we make that more acceptable to the parker? Because right now it's questionable. We need it to be acceptable.
And
It's a great statement you made, and unfortunately, you made me think of another story. But it's a perfect analogy of this, and this was so funny, and I just never anticipated this. So the discussions about Gateless started back in around 2014-15, right in the middle of us developing flow through, right, with the license plate technology and the phone number, and so being us, I decided I'm going to do one without a gate. I've got to see this. So we put in a parking operation without a gate. The only thing I was smart enough to do was I said, okay, I don't have a gate going up, but I've got to tell the customer to go. So we went out to a manufacturer that made red light, yellow light, green lights that hang over a street, right? So we put those on top of the can where the gate would have been.
Mm-hmm.
And it's right there looking right at the driver. The green light would come on and they would sit there. The gate didn't go up. Well, there was no gate.
the light is green.
I can remember I'll never forget this one. I walked back into the garage. I had been around to the front where one of the tenants was. I walk in the garage and I'm standing there and there's an older lady sitting in her car at the exit. And so I walk up to her and said, ma'am, can I help you? And she said, I've been sitting here 20 minutes. I don't know what to do. And I said, there's a green light shining on your face. I can see you glowing green.
He was just waiting for the...
Yes, she was waiting for this thing that didn't exist to go up. And it happened a lot. It happened a lot. And I thought, well, I guess that's a pretty good example of why this is never going to work. I mean, when I put up the red light, green light, and it's shining in the people's face, and their face is glowing green from the light, and they're sitting there looking, waiting on something else, a gate to go up, because they're so used to it.
It was just different. Yeah.
It was just different.
Yeah.
It was an interesting. I'll never forget that one. She was mad.
But it kind of ties to the conversation we had about being empathetic. Is this customer service experience a layer of empathy? Like maybe don't do what's best for your bottom line. Maybe don't do what's best for your employees. What's best for your customers? Whether you like it or not, be empathetic.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a connection there?
Yes.
Yeah, because at the core, we are a customer service industry. And I don't care what technology, what new buzzwords, whatever you throw at the industry, we are a customer service industry. The same way whenever I go to Chick-fil-A and the robot brings me my food on the little trays, or some of them have those, and it's like, it's still a customer service industry. I still expect whenever I place my order for it to be successful and for it to be fluid and for me to get what I want and for the people in the back to make it right and all the things. But the way it's being delivered to me, I still have an expectation that I am served well because I'm spending my money here. So I think that has to be the core of how we think about things and how we implement and approach things.
If you tell the robot, I ordered a Dr. Pepper and this is Coke, what does it do?
It dumps it off. No.
Well,
It doesn't listen, that's for sure.
in my neck of the woods, I'm just excited to see a Chick-fil-A. I can't imagine one with a robot. I'm gonna have to come to your house and see this.
Exciting. Well, this has been it's been an exciting discussion of Joaquin's podcast, because he brought so much to the table, and I hope we get some good listeners who will learn a lot from what this podcast brings to the table. Just listening to this, you'll learn a lot.
Yeah, and Joaquin touched on some of our favorite topics. So he even mentioned mentors and, customer service and e-commerce and Gateless and just overcoming challenges, friendship, good management. There is so much to take from Joaquin's episode, and I hope we were able to color in a little bit more, but the picture still has some black and white space. I know we have a lot more conversation we can have just about that one episode and continue it on going forward. Plan to join us in the future as we continue this conversation, because we have so much to talk about in this industry. And thank you for joining us on the Our Parking Industry podcast. To quote one of the greatest business minds of our time, Charles Munger, he said, "The best thing a human can do is help another human being know more." Here on Our Parking Industry podcast, we want to provide knowledge and resources. If you heard something that sparked your curiosity in today's episode, please reach out on our socials at TPN Consulting. You can find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Don't forget to subscribe and follow. See you next time on Our Parking Industry.